Good morning. I'm Mike Quigley, Congressman, 5th District, Illinois. Thank you for being here, and thanks for those who have joined us today from various clerk's office and boards of election. This year, the American people learned that Russia targeted 39 state election systems, including right here in Illinois, leading up to the 2016 election. 17 intelligence agencies have confirmed, without a doubt, that Russia hacked our democratic process. Additionally, we know that the Russians do not have to hack into any and every polling place to cast doubt, uncertainty, and suspicion over the integrity of our electoral process, which is, of course, their ultimate goal. Russians' election hacking, propaganda spreading, and dissemination of fake news is nothing new. And as Director Comey said, they will be back. Our democracy not only depends on the participation in the democratic process, but also on the promise that our participation allows of the voice of the people to be truly heard. This requires that our elections remain free and fair, conducted without interference. We must be active in our efforts to harden our defenses at every level of government to ensure our election infrastructure can stand up against attempted interference at the hands of foreign adversaries. At the federal level, I'm working to understand exactly what took place so we can address the election system vulnerabilities that still exist. I'm often asked, repeating what the President has said, isn't this just relitigating the election? And the truthful answer is no. First, you can understand a scenario in which the Russians would have wanted to help a Democrat over a Republican. But second, and important for today, is the fact that they successfully hacked into our election process and want to do more. Let's talk just for a second about these threats. Here in Illinois, we know the Russian hackers gained access to the database. I will let the experts with us today describe that. But understand this, from a national and local point of view. An estimated 42 states continue to use outdated voting machines susceptible to cyber intrusions and system crashes. Many of these voting machines, which can be more than a decade old, are not equipped to handle modern-day cybersecurity software. It's like having a 14 or 15-year-old computer on your desk. The equipment and software you would buy to protect that computer won't work on that computer anymore. In fact, in one of the world's best-known hacker conferences this year, participants were asked to hack. They were tasked with hacking into 25 different pieces of equipment, including voting machines. By the end of the conference, every piece of equipment was effectively breached in some manner by mostly novice hackers. If voter registration records are hacked and altered, eligible voters can be turned away from the polls or prevented from casting ballots. States should and must conduct post-election audits to confirm election results. Currently, though, 13 states continue to use voting machines that fail to produce a paper ballot or record. States will never be able to properly secure their complex election databases or machines without cybersecurity personnel with the expertise to detect and address cyber threats. When I talked to the former Homeland Security Chief during this investigation, he said and confirmed, most entities don't know they've been hacked. Often it takes 2 to 3 years before they know they've been hacked. And most of the time it takes somebody else to tell them they have been hacked. There are about 9,000 entities that run a federal election in this country. It's safe to say they don't all have the expertise and equipment necessary to protect the electoral process. So let me bring on, indeed, those experts to talk about why this matters and what we need to do to protect the process here in Illinois, and we'll close by talking about it from a national perspective. First, Kenneth Menzel, General Counsel, Illinois State Board of Elections.
Thank you, Representative Quigley. The State Board of Elections has been battling against hackers since the statewide voter database came into existence more than a decade ago. In the summer of 2016, we had a successful intrusion into the voter database, later identified as coming from Russian hackers, that allowed them to see a little under 90,000 records in a 16 million record database. Shortly after that, when our review of the intrusion raised the suspicion that of foreign involvement, we brought federal law enforcement in, and they in turn brought in Homeland Security. That started the ball rolling on discovering the attempts to get into numerous other state databases and led to the current attention and focus on election security. We made numerous security upgrades to the state voter database in the summer of 2016. We have an ongoing program to replace aging equipment with newer, more secure servers that feature better firewalls, and we continuously review our security practices to try and stay up to date with the latest state of the art. We're actively engaged in the national movement to increase security through better communication and sharing of information among various state election administrators and among the different levels of government within Illinois. As soon as DHS allowed state election administrators to get security clearances, our executive director applied, and we've been getting updates from the feds with security clearance level information. We've also joined MS-ISAC. That's a consortium of state data security people so that we can share information on threats in a faster manner. Since September of 2016, we've participated in Department of Homeland Security's program wherein they do a weekly scan of all of our public-facing websites to look for vulnerabilities, and we have passed each such scan since they began in September of 2016. We've been working with the cybersecurity staff at the State of Illinois' Department of Innovation and Technology, and in conjunction with them, we have been in contact with the county and city level election administrators to offer help to them on assessing and, where needed, improving their cybersecurity. We're planning to make this an ongoing activity from here forward. I would note that jurisdictions within Illinois, and most of the jurisdictions in other states as well, are operating with vote tabulation systems purchased in the middle 2000s using federal funds from HAVA grants. That equipment is at the end of its useful lifespan and will need to be replaced in the near future. New standards for vote tabulation systems include much better security. It would be a big help to have the county, or a big help to the county and city election jurisdictions if we could get another round of HAVA funding to purchase new equipment. It would also be helpful if the HAVA rules could be expanded to allow spending from HAVA funds on cybersecurity. Thank you.
I want to mention before I introduce our next speaker, the date that was given for purchasing of the current election equipment. Let's just remember why we went out and bought a lot of new election equipment last time, Gore Bush. We shouldn't have to have a threat of that magnitude again to influence our decisions to do the right thing. And finally, the boards of elections that are represented before you today by these experts are bipartisan. They have a set number of Democrats and Republicans on each board. That emphasizes that this cannot be a partisan issue. It must be bipartisan. And next, our very own Cook County Clerk, David Orr.
Thank you, Congressman Quigley, for getting us all together to talk about the key threats and what we're going to do about them. This is a serious challenge. I think it's a challenge we're up to. It's one that requires constant vigilance from everyone involved. That's election officials, the 9,000, at least local election officials that Mike mentioned, cybersecurity experts, and all local, state, and federal government officials. In Cook County, I believe your votes are safe, and I plan to keep them that way. But I do want to emphasize one thing when you talk about security. One of the things that we have here in Cook County is that, remember, we have a paper record of everything. So should there be a breach of some kind, hacking breach, other kind of breaches, we can recreate the election. In our touch screens, what we call touch screens, we have a paper record of those touch screens, unlike the one that Mike mentioned, in some states that don't. And secondly, with our paper ballots, of course, we have the paper ballots themselves. This is really critical in preparing for hacks, okay? The security mantra that we use in the office is defend, detect, and recover. This means we always work to defend against attacks. We detect threats and irregularities, and with an audit system with a paper trail so that we can, if need be, recover any lost data or ballots. We're holding the line, okay? We think we're doing a good job, frankly, but I think we're here to encourage Congressman Quigley and others. We need support. As you may know, my Director of Elections, Noah Prates here, has been an integral part of the national movement. He's been dealing with experts all throughout the country. He was at the hacking demonstration, which we wouldn't quite agree with the way that was characterized, but the bottom line is he is someone to watch. He has authored our white paper that you see here. He is dealing with, again, Mr. Quigley and so many others on this. So, and hopefully when we get to questions, we will get Noah up here. So a couple of quick things about the highlights that we do right now for security. Not all of them, just a few. Our voting tally system is kept on a secure private network with controlled access. We take detailed bit-level software comparisons known as forensic auditing during each election. These snapshots alert us to tampering and ensure software quality. On Election Day, select machines are taken from the precincts, brought to headquarters, where they're voted on in a test environment to ensure that voting tallies match the ballots cast. Our new voting machines, Mike made reference to that, we're in the process of acquiring new machines. They have a much greater security in mind, and they contain a number of new features. So we'll have digital images of every ballot, which can be used in post-election audits. Very important to us. Now let me turn briefly to what we think we need to handle this problem successfully. We need the support and funding, this is our big ask, and funding provided by policymakers and government agencies to help in these areas. First, funders can fortify our ability to defend by the following: supporting a digital network for all local election officials that will facilitate rapid sharing of threats and incidents. As you said, sometimes people hear way too late. This could be very important. Rapid sharing of incidents, as well as support increased training and resiliency. Financing an election infrastructure information security officer. We're looking at that right now. Our allies with the city and Suburban Cook under the county clerk's office are working on that right now. Ensuring the threat and incident information known to government is shared throughout our election network. Now, funders can increase our ability to detect, second point, by the use of modern public audits of all elections, the use of modern technology that captures a digital image of each ballot which can be tied to the original ballot and the cast ballot record. Jumping quickly to recovery, funders can help by building in redundancy that doesn't rely on technology. For example, paper poll books, backup electronic poll books, emergency paper ballots. These are all things that could be crucial. I'm going to skip that one because we already talked about reducing any systems that don't have a paper backup. No defense is perfect. It's impossible to defend against every conceivable attack. We try and make that clear. But if we detect breaches and recover from them quickly, we can survive them. Our security challenge is to ensure no attack exceeds our ability to detect and recover, whether that means restoring lost data or even recounting ballots to establish election results that are true and trusted. I do believe that we are keeping the people's vote secure and will remain so. The broader processes can be disturbed, but even that is something we can avoid with the needed investment. We do need the Congress, we do need the state, we need people to act and understand this is important, okay? This is important. These threats are real, but with the right kind of assistance, including funding, we believe we can, invest this to protect our election security and make people feel secure about your future elections. Thank you.
Joseph Sobecki is the Executive Director of the DuPage County Election System.
Thank you, Representative Quigley. I've been involved in administering elections in DuPage County for nearly 2 decades. And in that time, I've observed election authorities throughout the state are able to administer and conduct accurate elections through, while ensuring the integrity of the process through compliance with audits and testing prescribed to state law, with the implementation of operational and chain of custody procedures, and the assistance of dedicated civic-minded individuals serving as judges of election in the polling place. In DuPage County, we have also adopted additional measures. Extensive logic and accuracy testing of equipment beyond what is required by the state, standard background checks, a fully sandboxed secure vote tabulation server, and a robust chain of custody procedure, all working towards assuring the consent of the governed. Legislative and technological advances as recent as the last 2 years have allowed tremendous ability for the election authorities to give voters power in online voter registration, the ability to apply to vote by mail online, a unique identifier that will follow them throughout the state in a statewide database, and the ability to register to vote at any location in early voting or at their polling place on election day. All of these extended services are made possible through the access of the digital world. The election landscape has evolved, and with this evolution comes new challenges, and these are challenges we must face head-on. We now face threats to our voter registration databases, our voting systems, and misinformation in an attempt to lessen the confidence the voters have in our systems. Under a board with bipartisan support, the DuPage County Election Commission is working with DuPage County in order to acquire new voting systems to complement the next generation firewalls and intrusion detection systems already in place. We now face the challenge, as mentioned earlier, without the appropriations made available 15 years ago when we adopted the current systems. I'm optimistic with the cooperation of the election authorities, the assistance of our elected officials, and with the consultation of experts in security and technology, that we can develop a set of guidelines and standards that, whether you live in Southern Illinois, City of Chicago, or the suburbs, will be implemented uniformly throughout the state. It is imperative that in order to, once this roadmap is completed, that in order to attain the ultimate goal, that the funding is appropriated necessary to meet this goal. I'm encouraged by our discussions that we have had here today and the work that's being done. And I believe that we can make sure that we can reinforce the people's faith in our election system. Thanks.
Jim Allen, the Director of Communications, the Chicago Board of Election Systems.
Thank you, Congressman, for gathering us here. And I want to acknowledge Ken Menzel, Clerk David Orr, Joe Sebecki, and also Noah Prates, whose thumbprints are all over a blueprint that we believe is going to carry all election authorities forward on this issue. Just to give some background on why this is important, there's an MIT professor who's in the Hall of Fame for computer security. His name is Ronald Rivest. And Professor Rivest had a great way of summing up what it takes to keep the faith in our elections. A voting system, he said, must determine the winner and convince the losers that they really lost. Remember those words the next time you're around a recount, because they've never been truer. And remember those words the next time you see post-election turmoil anywhere around the globe. Those scenes of riots and protests in capital streets most always occur where election irregularities make it difficult to believe who won and who lost. Today, we're seeing those same suspicions creep in from tiny tin pot regimes to our established, sound, and mature democracies like the United States. And these new fears are rooted in the threats of hackers and our reliance on digital technology. As noted earlier, our top federal investigatory and intelligence agencies reached the inescapable conclusion that Russian state actors were behind the attack on Illinois voter registration systems and other systems across the country last year. Moreover, it was Russians who were busy poisoning our social media ecosystem through bogus Twitter and Facebook accounts. These accounts duped, yes, duped, Americans into spreading Kremlin propaganda, utter fiction on topics like immigration and terrorism in the build-up to last year's election. Now, election administrators have no means or desire to control social media, but we can and must take steps to protect the ballot box and every security system connected to it. Here in Illinois, we have a security of a paper record for every single ballot that's cast, which is invaluable in the process of going through a recount or an audit. In Chicago, we also make certain that no part of our balloting systems are on any network linked to the internet. And in Chicago and other jurisdictions, like Joe was describing, we receive a steady flow of information from MSISAC, that's the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Each day, MSISAC issues updates on cyber threat prevention, protection, response, and recovery. And like other jurisdictions, Chicago has contracted with an independent company to perform a top-to-bottom security assessment to score all of our safeguards and risks in our computer networks and programs. Even so, we can and must do even more. We seek to acquire new voting equipment at all of our jurisdictions, and the systems that are now available capture the image of every paper ballot as it's being fed into that scanner. That adds another layer of security and transparency in the event of questions or recounts after Election Day. That will require funding. And as hard-pressed as the City of Chicago and Cook County and DuPage County are to finance the purchase of new voting equipment, so are other jurisdictions all across the country. As documented by the Brennan Center, voting systems in most every state are growing outdated. They're brittle. They're not broken. And the cost is the biggest issue in getting them updated. That's why Homeland Security's designation of our nation's election infrastructure as critical infrastructure is a positive step. Often when we think of critical infrastructure, we think of financial networks, power grids, interstate highways, and airports. But our election systems rank just as high, if not higher, given that the integrity of our elections is the very foundation of our entire government. We look to Homeland Security to provide growing levels of resources for all election agencies, rural, suburban, and urban, as we seek to continue to defend our elections from outside attackers. Because an attack on Quincy affects Chicago and vice versa, because it can undermine the value of every individual's votes. And we have to worry not only about the voting systems, but all of the electronic registration systems, the electronic poll books. Can you imagine if in a swing state, one of these systems gets manipulated to show that everybody in that jurisdiction is already early voted? Even though the balloting system is accurate, even though everything is locked down, you could have turmoil in the polling places and people disenfranchised, and that would just be wrong. So we've got a lot more work to do, and we thank you for your service on the Intelligence Committee, and hope that we can get, as Noah says, a rounding error in the defense budget to take care of what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Final thoughts, and we'll take your question. It's about $1 billion to replace the equipment nationally. So it's not cheap, but let's remember, when I first got briefed on this, I was told there are 9,000 entities, so they can't hack into them all. First, they can, but second, I don't think they need to. If they're indeed trying to challenge the credibility of this, which is clearly what the Russians' intent was, they only need to hack into 2 or 3 major counties in this country. And you know what they are. That would be tough swing areas to raise doubt and challenge the integrity of the democratic process. So we need new machines that can handle new software to provide the protections we need. They all have to have a paper record so they can have an audit. They need help with the expertise at all levels, coming primarily from the federal government, to help local governments understand the risk and the challenges we face. I want to thank all those who participated today, and I am indeed confident that we can get this done. But the election is less than 100 days away here in Illinois. I have faith that Illinois is ready, but it still will face challenges. I don't have the faith that this country is ready at this point to face these risks and challenges today. I'll take any of your questions. The folks here ought to be able to answer them with their combined expertise.
What's the timeline for funding? I mean, is there any on the federal level?
Well, let me ask that first, is to this point, are there grants available that you could go to now?
There's a very small amount, there still remains a very small amount of HAVA funding from the last decades, but we're nowhere near being able to replace the equipment throughout the state. So this would require a new infusion of funds if we were going to be replacing equipment on a statewide basis.
How much would that cost on a statewide?
I don't have a specific number on that, but I think the election administrators here might be able to give us sort of an estimate on that.
Any estimate?
Well, I'm giving an estimate. But we have a continuing resolution or some sort of budgetary process. We're trying to do it before the end of the year in DC. We need help from the grassroots to push up.
In answer to your question, I think conservatively, we're looking at about $130 million easily statewide. But I think all of the jurisdictions around the state of Illinois and around the country, for that matter, would welcome any kind of leverage support that we could get from Washington. So that if we could reduce the burden, I think it would help all of our agencies replace our equipment that much sooner and convince the local funding bodies to come up with the offsetting amount.
If I might just tag on to that, the problem isn't,
Could you give us your name?
sure, my name is Noah Prates. I'm the Director of Elections in suburban Cook County. The problem isn't simply a technology or a policy one. With good technology and policy changes, we can prevent the catastrophic worst-case scenario. But Congressman Quigley alluded to the need for cyber-skilled workers in every office, and that's a significant lift as well. You got to remember that probably 80% of the state have elections offices of 2 or 3 people, part-time quite often. And imagine them having to come in all of a sudden and be cyber managers. It was an easy job up till 2000. We were logistics managers. And after 2000, we had to become IT managers and legal compliance managers. And after 2016, now we have to be cyber managers. And it's a tremendous lift that we've got to close really quickly, and we cannot do that without financial support.
I don't know who wants to take this, but what's the level of risk for the upcoming election in Illinois? I mean, is that on your minds? Are you worried?
Well, I think, go ahead, I think we discussed that. Go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the risk of attack has been laid out there pretty clearly by the defense agencies. So we've got to remember, though, security is not simply about perfect defense. Our policymakers in Illinois have made some really sound decisions over the years. David Orr, with Mike Madigan, actually led the charge to make sure that when we bought equipment in the early 2000s, that they had voter verifiable paper trails. So that is the piece that allows us to recover if breached, right? So from a baseline security perspective, Illinois is in really good shape. That said, there are things that we can do to greatly increase our ability to detect breach and then to recover if it happens.
So again, to close, this is going to take a bipartisan effort. What we learned last year was there was pushback from some jurisdictions that they didn't want their view was they didn't want the federal government meddling in their elections. Well, the Russians are, so maybe you want your own government to try to help. So it's going to take a bipartisan effort in Congress and within the White House to help encourage this. And it would help a great deal if the President of the United States acknowledged that this happened and frankly didn't call it a witch hunt. So with that, we're around here for a few minutes if anyone wants to talk briefly, but we thank you for your participation.